The first thing my mother said when she called me that afternoon was, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean to cause trouble." She sounded calm, but I knew that tone. It was the voice she used whenever someone had humiliated her, and she was trying to convince herself it wasn't worth crying over. "What happened?" I asked. There was a long silence before she answered. "I don't think they want me using the neighborhood pool anymore." I gripped my phone tighter. "Who said that?" "The HOA president, the blonde woman I've told you about, Karen." My mother tried to laugh it off. Maybe I misunderstood, but I already knew she hadn't. There, 3 hours earlier, my 73-year-old mother, Alina, had walked to the community pool carrying the same blue beach bag she'd owned for nearly 15 years. She had lived in the neighborhood for almost 2 decades. She paid every HOA fee, never missed a meeting, never received a single violation. Everyone knew her, or at least they used to. Ever since a new HOA board had taken over 6 months earlier, the neighborhood had changed. The smiles disappeared. Rules multiplied. Neighbors stopped talking. People who had lived peacefully for years suddenly found violation notices taped to their doors over trash cans, flower pots, mailbox colors, and even wind chimes. At the center of it all was HOA President Karen Mitchell. She loved power. She loved attention. And most of all, she loved deciding who belonged. That afternoon, the pool wasn't crowded. A few children splashed in the shallow end, while older residents relaxed under umbrellas. Mom quietly found her favorite chair near the water. She opened a paperback novel, applied sunscreen, and smiled as she watched the children laugh. She wasn't bothering anyone. 10 peaceful minutes passed. Then everyone heard the sharp click of high heels. Karen. She marched through the gate carrying a clipboard like it was some kind of badge. Behind her followed 2 HOA board members. Neither looked comfortable. Karen scanned the pool until she spotted my mother. There she is. Several people looked over. Mom glanced up politely. "Oh, hello." Karen didn't return the greeting. Instead, she stopped directly in front of her chair. "I need you to leave." Mom blinked. "I'm sorry." "You heard me." "I'm afraid I don't understand." Karen folded her arms. "This pool is for residents who comply with community standards." "I do." Karen looked down at the blue beach bag. "Actually, you've accumulated several unresolved issues." Mom frowned. "I've never received any notice." Karen smiled. "That's because we were being patient." Several people nearby exchanged confused looks. An elderly man quietly whispered to his wife, "Alina has never broken a rule." Karen ignored him. "You failed to maintain landscaping according to revised standards." "My flowers. Deadheading requirements. They're blooming." Karen continued. "You also have an unauthorized bird feeder. It's been there for 10 years. New rules." Mom remained calm. "No one informed me." Karen shrugged. "We mailed everyone. I never received anything." "That's unfortunate." Then Karen leaned closer. "Regardless, until these violations are resolved, your pool privileges are suspended." A mother sitting nearby raised her hand. "Excuse me, can she show you proof she lives here?" Karen turned sharply. "This doesn't concern you." "It kind of does." Karen's smile disappeared. "The board has already made its decision." My mother slowly stood. "I'm happy to fix anything if someone explains what needs attention." Karen shook her head. "Not today. So I have to leave. Immediately." One little girl looked at my mother. But she's nice. The girl's father gently pulled her closer. Karen pointed toward the exit. Now, for a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence was heavier than shouting. Finally, my mother picked up her towel, folded her chair, lifted the old blue beach bag onto her shoulder. Before leaving, she quietly looked around. I'm sorry if I caused anyone any inconvenience. It broke the hearts of nearly everyone there, because she truly believed she'd done something wrong. Karen watched her walk away with the satisfaction of someone who enjoyed winning battles no one else wanted to fight. As Mom reached the gate, the elderly man who had defended her earlier stood up. This is shameful. Karen spun around. Are you questioning the authority of the board? I'm questioning your humanity. Karen wrote something on her clipboard. Congratulations. The man frowned. What? You've just earned yourself a formal warning. The entire pool fell silent again. Fear spread faster than anger. Nobody wanted to be next. When Mom arrived home, she carefully put away her towel as though nothing unusual had happened. She watered her roses, fed the birds, made herself a cup of tea. Only then did she call me. She spent more time apologizing for interrupting my work than describing what Karen had done. That's who my mother was. She always worried about everyone else's feelings before her own. By the time she finished telling me the story, my coffee had gone cold. I'll stop by this evening, I said. You don't have to. I want to. It's just a misunderstanding. I hope you're right. But deep down, I already knew she wasn't. Because Karen Mitchell wasn't simply enforcing rules. She was selecting targets. And my mother had just become one. What Karen didn't know, what no one on that HOA board knew, was that this neighborhood hadn't appeared on my radar because of swimming pool complaints, or landscaping violations, or bird feeders. For the past 4 months, I had been working quietly with a federal financial crimes task force investigating allegations of embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering tied to several HOA management contracts across the county. One anonymous tip had pointed directly to this community. At first, it looked like another routine financial audit. Missing reserve funds, inflated maintenance invoices, contracts awarded to shell companies. Nothing unusual on paper, until every trail somehow led back to one name. Karen Mitchell. I hadn't told my mother. I hadn't told anyone. The investigation was confidential. We were waiting for enough evidence before making a move. And after months of watching financial records, I finally had a reason to start watching people. Because bullies who abuse small amounts of power often reveal much bigger secrets when they think no one can stop them. Karen believed she'd embarrassed an elderly woman in front of the neighborhood. She thought she'd won. She had no idea. She had just walked straight into the biggest mistake of her life when I pulled into my mother's driveway that evening. She was on her knees in the front yard, trimming the roses Karen had claimed were out of compliance. She looked up and smiled as if nothing had happened. You drove all this way for an old lady who got kicked out of a pool. I smiled back, but inside I was furious. I drove all this way to have dinner with my mom. She laughed softly. You always did know how to make me feel better. As we walked toward the house, I noticed a bright orange envelope taped to her front door. Another HOA notice. Mom sighed before she even opened it. It wasn't there this morning. Inside was a violation letter. Not one violation. 7 overgrown shrubs. improper flower spacing, decorative rocks not approved by the architectural committee, bird feeder, mailbox needing repainting, garden edging exceeding approved height, and a fine of $850 due within 10 days. Mom stared at the paper. I've lived here 19 years. Her voice cracked. None of these have ever been a problem. I folded the notice and slipped it into my pocket. I'll handle it. She immediately shook her head. No, I don't want you arguing with anyone because of me. I'm not going to argue. You promise? I looked into her eyes. I promise. Technically, it wasn't a lie. The next morning, I parked across from the HOA office before sunrise. Not in a government vehicle. Just an ordinary gray sedan. No badge. No suit. Just another resident visiting the neighborhood. The office opened at 9. Karen arrived at 8:37. She stepped out of a luxury SUV, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying an expensive leather purse. Interesting. According to the financial disclosures she'd signed for the HOA, her annual compensation barely justified that lifestyle. Yet this wasn't the first expensive purchase we documented. The pieces were beginning to fit. At exactly 9, residents started lining up outside. Most weren't there to complain. They were there to pay fines. One elderly couple handed over a check for nearly $600. A young family argued over a parking violation. Another man quietly accepted a landscaping citation without saying a word. Fear had replaced community. Karen enjoyed every second of it. She spoke to people without looking them in the eye. She interrupted them, threatened legal action, repeated one sentence over and over. If you don't like the rules, you can move. Then it was my turn. She glanced at my mother's address on the file. Oh, a smirk spread across her face. So you're Eleanor's son. I am. I assume you're here to pay. I'm here to understand. There isn't much to understand. She slid the violation file toward me. Your mother has repeatedly failed to comply. I noticed most of these violations appeared yesterday. Coincidence? I also noticed none include photographs. We don't have to provide photographs. No inspection dates either. Our inspectors know what they're doing. I nodded slowly. And who are your inspectors? Karen smiled. That's HOA business. I see. She leaned back confidently. If your mother doesn't pay within 10 days, additional penalties begin. How much? Depends. On what? On my board's decision. Her board. Not the governing documents. Not written policy. Her board. Interesting. As I stood to leave, Karen gave me one last warning. You seem like a smart man. I try. Tell your mother to stop making herself the victim. I looked directly at her. My mother usually apologizes when people hurt her. Karen laughed. Then she should apologize faster. The office fell silent. Several residents looked away, pretending not to hear. Nobody challenged her. Nobody ever did. That afternoon, I met with one of my colleagues several miles away. We spread dozens of documents across a conference table. Bank statements, vendor invoices, maintenance contracts, reserve fund transfers, everything we'd collected over 4 months. My partner tapped one contractor's name. Same landscaping company. I know. They've been paid almost 3 times market value. And they don't own any equipment. I nodded. Shell Company. He slid over another folder. The registered mailing address belongs to a UPS mailbox. Another fake. Then another document. Another. Another. The same pattern repeated. Cleaning contracts. Pool maintenance. Fence repairs. Holiday decorations. Thousands of dollars leaving the HOA every month. No real work being done. Money disappearing through companies that barely existed. And almost every approval carried one familiar signature. Karen Mitchell. Still, financial evidence wasn't enough. Not yet. We needed intent. We needed proof that she knowingly controlled the scheme. Without it, expensive lawyers could argue she was simply careless. That's when my phone vibrated. It was my mother. Sweetheart. What's wrong? They're here again. I was already grabbing my keys. Who? The HOA. I'm on my way. There. By the time I reached her house, 3 HOA board members stood in the front yard. Karen was holding another clipboard. A landscaping crew waited behind them with hedge trimmers and chainsaws. What is this? I asked. Karen smiled. Emergency compliance action. For what emergency? She pointed toward my mother's garden. The board has voted to remove unauthorized landscaping. Mom looked horrified. Those roses were planted by my late husband. Karen shrugged. Sentimental value isn't covered by the bylaws. They've been there 18 years. They're coming out today. The landscaping workers hesitated. One of them quietly asked Karen, "Are you sure we're supposed to do this?" Karen snapped. "Do your job." None of them moved. She became even louder. I said, "Cut them down." My mother stepped in front of the garden. Her hands were shaking. "Please." They're all I have left of him. For just a second. Even the workers looked uncomfortable. Karen didn't. She folded her arms. "If you interfere with HOA contractors, we'll bill you for their wasted time." I could feel every eye on the street, watching from behind curtains. Neighbors wanted to help. But months of intimidation had taught them to stay quiet. Karen believed fear made people obedient. She never imagined it also made them witnesses. I pulled out my phone. Not to make a call. To record. Karen noticed immediately. "You can't record a private HOA matter." I calmly replied, "We're standing on a public street." Her confidence flickered for the first time. Only for a second. Then she recovered. "Fine." She turned back to the workers. "What are you waiting for?" One of the workers slowly lowered his chainsaw. "I'm sorry. I can't do this." Another nodded. "My grandmother has roses like these." Karen's face turned red. "You're fired." The workers looked at each other. Then, without another word, they climbed back into their trucks and drove away. Karen was furious. "You'll all regret this." But nobody answered. The engines disappeared down the street. For the first time, Karen had given an order, and someone had refused. She pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over." I met her stare without saying a word. Because she was right. It wasn't over. Not even close. As Karen stormed back to her SUV, she made one phone call before driving away. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I recognized the number she dialed. It matched one already highlighted in our investigation files. A number belonging to a company that officially existed only on paper. A company that had received hundreds of thousands of dollars in HOA payments. At that moment, The final missing piece clicked into place. Karen thought she was calling someone to clean up another problem. She had no idea. She had just connected herself directly to the fraud scheme we'd been building for months. And this time, we had it on video. That night, after my mother finally went to bed, I sat alone in my car outside her house. The street was quiet. Porch lights glowed across the neighborhood, and everything looked peaceful. If someone drove by, they'd think this was the safest community in the county. They'd never guess how many people living there had been threatened, fined, or bullied into silence. I opened my laptop and uploaded the video from earlier that day. Karen ordering my mother's late husband's roses to be destroyed. The landscaping crew refusing. And most importantly, Karen's phone call immediately afterward. Within minutes, my phone rang. It was my supervisor. I just watched the footage. So did you catch it? We did. The phone number. It matches the shell company. He paused. That call came less than 30 seconds after the confrontation. So she's warning someone. Exactly. He took a deep breath. I think we're done waiting. For months, our team had followed bank records, fake invoices, and suspicious contracts. Now we had something more powerful. Behavior. Intent. A clear connection between the HOA president and the people moving money through fake businesses. The paperwork told one story. Karen's own actions told the rest. The next 48 hours moved quickly. Search warrants were approved. Financial records were subpoenaed. Electronic devices were authorized for collection. Every step went through the proper legal process. No shortcuts. No surprises. Just evidence. Meanwhile, Karen had no idea. She continued acting like nothing had changed. In fact, she became even more aggressive. Residents found fresh violation notices on their doors. Parking fines doubled. Several families received letters threatening legal action. Even the elderly man who had defended my mother at the pool was told his home would be placed under a compliance review. Fear returned. But something else had started spreading too. Whispers. People had seen Karen trying to destroy Alina's roses. They had watched contractors refuse. Neighbors began talking to one another again. For the first time in months, they compared violation letters. Dates didn't match. Inspection reports were identical. Some notices were issued while homeowners were out of state. Others cited problems that photographs proved didn't exist. One neighbor quietly contacted our office through the public fraud hotline. Then another. Then another. Each call brought new documents. Canceled checks. Emails. Meeting minutes. Copies of contracts. The wall Karen had built with intimidation was beginning to crack. Because once one person stops being afraid, others usually follow. 3 mornings later, Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting. She expected applause. Instead, nearly every chair in the clubhouse was filled with angry homeowners. My mother almost didn't come. I don't like conflict, she told me. You don't have to speak. I'd rather stay home. You've spent 19 years taking care of this community. She smiled sadly. I suppose I owe it one more visit. When we walked inside, dozens of neighbors greeted her. Several hugged her. One little girl from the pool ran over. I'm happy you're back. My mother's eyes filled with tears. She realized something she hadn't known before. She'd never been alone. People had simply been too frightened to say so. Karen stood at the front of the room with her usual confident smile. She banged the gavel. This meeting will now come to order. Then she saw me sitting beside my mother. Her smile faded. "You again?" I simply nodded. Karen began reading a prepared statement. The board has determined that recent accusations against HOA leadership are false, defamatory, and motivated by individuals unwilling to follow community standards. A few board members shifted nervously. One wouldn't even look at her. Karen continued, "We will also be approving additional enforcement measures to maintain order." That's when someone knocked on the clubhouse door. Once, twice, the room fell silent. Karen looked annoyed. "We're in the middle of a meeting." The door opened. Several investigators entered with clearly displayed federal credentials, accompanied by local law enforcement serving court-authorized warrants related to the financial investigation. No one said a word. Karen stared at them. There must be some mistake. The lead investigator spoke calmly. "We have court-authorized warrants regarding an ongoing financial fraud investigation involving HOA funds." Every face in the room turned toward Karen. She laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." The investigator continued, "We'll need access to financial records, computers, phones, and accounting documents." Karen looked toward the other board members. Nobody moved. Nobody defended her. One board member slowly raised his hand. "I voted against those contracts." Another quietly added, "I asked for audits." Then another. Karen said the paperwork was confidential. Karen's confidence disappeared. She looked around the room, searching for support. She found none. As investigators began collecting records, one of them placed several binders on the table. Bank transfers, vendor agreements, payment histories. The evidence spoke for itself. One investigator turned to Karen. "We've traced multiple payments from HOA reserve funds to companies linked through shared ownership records and financial accounts." Karen tried to interrupt. "I can explain. You'll have the opportunity." The room remained completely silent. No dramatic speeches. No shouting. Just the weight of months of evidence finally catching up with someone who believed she was untouchable. Over the following weeks, forensic accountants completed their review. Hundreds of thousands of dollars intended for neighborhood improvements had been diverted through fake maintenance contracts and inflated invoices. The community pool hadn't needed major repairs. The landscaping bills had been inflated. Several vendors existed only on paper. Insurance premiums had been manipulated. Reserve funds had quietly disappeared. Homeowners had unknowingly financed the scheme through years of unnecessary fines and increased dues. The HOA board was dissolved. A court appointed temporary management, while residents elected new leadership. Every improper violation issued during Karen's administration was reviewed. Most were thrown out. Many fines were refunded. The roses outside my mother's house remained exactly where they had always been. That spring, the neighborhood held its first community picnic in years. Children filled the pool again. Neighbors laughed together. Nobody carried clipboards. Nobody walked around looking for violations. As the afternoon sun reflected across the water, my mother sat in her favorite chair with the same blue beach bag beside her. The little girl from before waved. "Miss Eleanor." My mother smiled and waved back. "You came back." She laughed softly. "I never wanted to leave." I handed her an iced tea. "You know, you could have yelled at Karen that first day." She looked at me. "Would it have helped?" "No." She smiled. "I've learned something." "What's that?" Kindness doesn't always stop bullies. She looked around at the families enjoying the pool. But kindness gives good people something worth protecting. I nodded. She was right. Karen had believed power came from making people feel small. She was wrong. Real power came from ordinary people refusing to stay silent when someone vulnerable was treated unfairly. The day Karen ordered my mother to leave that pool, she thought she had embarrassed an elderly woman who would never fight back. Instead, she exposed a fraud scheme that had been hiding behind HOA rules for years. And in the end, the pool she tried to use as a symbol of power became the place where the entire neighborhood finally got its community back.